Welcome to the Tribe of Testimonies. Here you will find conversations with faithful Native American members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sharing their stories and their love of the Savior. My name's Andrea Hales. I'm Navajo, and I'm glad that you've decided to come and join us today. Last week, if you checked in, we listened to Shiloh Luper. Today, we are also listening to Shiloh Luper. This is one of 3 episodes with Shiloh. We just recorded so much, and I didn't want to delete any of it because his story is so jaw-dropping. So here is episode 2 of 3. If you haven't listened last week, go back and listen to last week, and come back next week for episode 3. Wow. So there's 2 things I want to ask. Like, have they followed you into sobriety or not?
So, yeah, luckily my kid is interesting. My kids, super good. Their morals were super good, even though growing up around that, really good morals. I think they kind of maybe saw me get out of hand a little bit. And so they're pretty good about, like, I always tell people, like, when, even though I was the worst offender, I always tell them when recreation turns into occupation, there's a problem, right? So I'd always say, recreational use is okay on the weekends, but when it turns into occupation where you're doing it every day, it's a problem. It wasn't for me because I could hold down a job. Most people can't hold down a job. So they seem to kind of understand that. My daughter went to college and she understood that. And so she kind of was like, well, the weekends are for the weekends and the weekdays are for the weekdays. And I separate those 2 things. And so they never really kind of went down that rabbit hole. They watched both their grandparents die of alcoholism and COPD. Literally watched them die. And so I think that kind of like, they just kind of like, okay, I'm going to balance this a little bit. So, but to answer your question, yes, the people, my former wife, Danielle, my kids, it took them 2 years into my sobriety before they even started speaking to me. When Danielle left me, the kids left as well. And rightfully so. I was a horrible, horrible person and I was doing horrible things. All aspects of marriage and all aspects of just, with anybody, lying, stealing, robbing. I've told people I have blood on my hands. I've been involved in deals where people aren't alive anymore. And so I understand that. And those are things that I really wrestle with, as I know people that aren't alive directly because of things that I've touched and been involved in. And those are hard. And that's a real thing, and so. But with that change, they have, they're not in the church, they're adults and I think they kind of want to make that decision on their own.
Of course.
But, they're definitely trying to learn who Christ is. I teach them, true Christian principles. That's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yeah. That's true Christianity.
And they were there
restored Christianity
at the fireside that we watched.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's such a big change for them, and it's so fast. I think it's a little bit of whiplash for them. So they're just kind of like, whoa, you never talked about Jesus ever. Okay,
you're like, well, I didn't have Jesus when I was.
yeah, but I'm kind of like I don't give anybody a chance to kind of like, here's the milk. I'm like trying to shove the steak down their mouth and the milk and the butter. I'm like, here's all the information. And they're like, we don't even understand who Jesus is. You're talking about the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, and temples and the priesthood and prophets and Joseph Smith and all these things. And they're just like, they got to, and so, but they're going to a good Christian church that teaches good Christian principles, right? Christ-centered principles. They don't teach things like the rapture, and I want to be careful that I don't offend anybody that may listen to this or anybody else, but they don't teach things that really don't have, a lot of doctrine to back it up. And so that's good. And so it's allowed me to kind of segue, real doctrine principles, the Book of Mormon and the church principles, the restored gospel principles. So
yeah. So now tell us about your conversion part. Like, how did you come back to, did you ever spend time in jail? Like, how bad did it get before you hit rock bottom, before you came out and found Jesus?
Yeah. So I spent plenty of time in jail. I always skated big trouble, and I had money. So anytime you got in trouble, money can get you out of a lot. I think you guys are both attorneys. You understand that the more money you have, the better off you are. And so I never had a desire to quit drugs. I was able to maintain that addiction, maintain success. But what happened was, I started falling back into, so now I'm getting close to my 40s. So this is a 29-year addiction. So I'm getting close to my 40s now, 37, 38, 39. I didn't see it at the time, but I started falling back into that state I was before I went to rehab when I was 16, losing grip of reality, hearing things that weren't there. If I drank too much, I was like, in fact, I people wouldn't be around me, started not being around me, including my kids and including Danielle. They're like, when you drink hard liquor, they're like, I don't know what goes on. Like it's not you. And I would hear things, accuse people of things that weren't there, but I would just wake up in the morning and be like, whatever, that's not what it is. I had a friend tell me one time, he's hanging out with me. He says, I don't know what happened to you last night, where you went, or who that was, but I'll never want to be around that person again. And so I kind of maintained that for like I said, up to 37, 38. We was in California. I had left. I kind of semi-retired, so to speak, and went to California and got into cannabis at a very, very large scale, and didn't really understand what I was getting into when I first originally went down there. And it's a whole different, California is a whole different scene when it comes to drugs and distribution and money, and just, it's like the movies. And so I went down there and got really kind of caught up in it, and having these big cannabis farms, and being able to get in on this reservation that's pretty hard to get on and to stay on. A lot of times you get ran out or you get murdered up there. They have the highest murder rate per capita in California. It's super dangerous. There's a lot of cartel up there. And so I was able to kind of seg my way in there and get established there, and kind of lost grip of reality with, my marriage and family, and kind of even trying to keep those LDS morals, even living the state that I was living, still trying to keep that family unity. That kind of went away. And, my wife, I'd been so bad. I was so out of touch with reality at that time. Danielle left, and she was gone for 5 or 7 days, and I didn't know it. She moved out.
And you didn't know it.
So imagine if, you packed up all your stuff and you left, and your husband didn't know you. I mean, that's a lot of stuff, right? I mean,
yeah.
I say this a lot in front of people, but it's true. Especially in the room, everything belongs to the female. Okay. Like, nothing's really mine, even though you think it's yours. Like, oh yeah. But when you really kind of step back a little bit and get like an arm's length away from me, like, oh, like this is all hers. Even like the closet, like I have a sliver of clothes. Like I'm pretty low maintenance, and Danielle's low maintenance, but they still have, let's just have women. They have more shoes, more clothes. That's just how it is. It's not right, wrong, or indifferent. But 20 years of being with somebody, you should know when they're gone, like the first day they're gone, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what happened? It was like 5 or 6 days. I remember going through the drawer, opening the closet, and I'm like, why is this so, like, it just dawned on me, like everything was gone.
What?
And so I opened a bunch of drawers, they're empty, and my oldest daughter was there at a time, and she was getting ready to leave, and they were all kind of like planning this, and Danielle had left, I had no idea, and I went out to her and I said, I think your mom left me. And she's just like, I don't want to be in the middle of it. Like, you got your things to work out. And that just made me angry. And so that's when I realized, okay, fine. I'm going to really be single now. I have all these things going on for me. I have all these connections. I've got all this stuff going on, and I'll just, whatever. I'll pay you whatever you need to pay. And I got angry and bitter. And that was in like, I think, maybe the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019. And so from that point on, everything in my life just started falling apart. Just, it didn't, like, things that have never happened to me started happening to me ever. You know, I get robbed, you know, more than once, you know, something's breaking down, you know, people in my life are not working out the way they should be working out. I'm losing out on everything. Like every single thing is just not working out. It just was like a domino effect. And this went on through the whole year. And I'm very stubborn, and I just doubled down, you know, and just, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And all of a sudden up to 2019, kind of the end of 2019, you know, not being with my family really set in hard. You know, even though the things I was teaching him and the way that I was raising him was completely wrong, you know, we spent every Christmas together. We spent Thanksgiving together. Audrey's a New Year's baby, so we celebrated New Year's together all the time. And then those things just, you know, that was the first year that all of a sudden I was like, I was alone for Thanksgiving. I was like, oh, this kind of sucks. You know, like this was pretty hard. And then Christmas, you know, and then, you know, New Year's. And then all of a sudden this thing, COVID, started being talked about. It was like really weird. I thought, man, COVID, like, you know, what's going on? And I was really not reality. I wasn't there. And then, you know, I think it was February where the reality of COVID was coming in more and more. There was a bunch of fires going on in California. There was just a lot of weird stuff that happened in 2020, especially in California with the fires. And I found myself, you know, it was probably the end of February, close to March, where I just really found myself alone, you know, completely alone, no money. Everything in the last 13, 14, 15, 16 months just fell apart. Everything that I ever had, I lost a grip of everything. And I just felt just such a hollow emptiness inside. And so I'd made a decision to take my life at that point, you know, and I was sitting in my room, and to be in the worst state of mind you can be in. It was probably the first time in my entire life where I could actually hear myself think. In fact, it was so quiet, and there was such a negative energy and a negative, like, I don't know how to explain this. Like if you were to go into those quiet chambers where you have like negative noise, I don't know if that's the right thing to say or not, where you can you can feel your blood going through your veins. Like I could feel my blood going through my veins. I could feel like if I had a creak in my joint, it was like amplified. It was such a weird thing. It was really scary. I could hear the process of my whole body just working and blood flowing through me, and almost like if you were to zoom in and envision just a droplet of sweat coming out of you. It was such a weird thing to be in. And I was sitting there, and I could reflect, and all of these things I was reflecting on was just horrible. Just emptiness and vast, empty, cold, clammy. And if you felt the presence of the adversary and the power of the adversary, it was short of meeting Lucifer, Satan, the devil, evil face to face. The presence of that was incredibly, incredibly intense. It was incredibly intense. It was scary. And I was writing, in that moment, I was just writing my note. And I just wanted to make sure my family knew, hey, this is my own fault. Like, you had nothing to do with this. I have no way out. And I really didn't have no way out. I'm like, there's no way out of this. But at that moment, it was like, it wasn't a voice, but I could hear it as clear as you and I speaking. Yeah. But it didn't talk to me. It was more of like a feeling. Yeah. And something in your head, but it was like if a pin drop in that negativeness. That's how different, you know, you hear about these people who have kind of these near-death experiences, and they meet Jesus and they feel this love. It's the polar opposite of what I was going through at that moment. Was I felt this immense amount of evil and destruction. But it was like, because it was so negative and so intense, that little bit of like redemption that was going on. I didn't know it was redemption at the time. It was like a pin drop, was so impactful. And at the time I didn't know this, but when you read, like, your heart gets pricked, If you pricked your heart with a needle, you feel it, right? You prick your finger with a needle, you feel it. It doesn't matter what's going on. It's like, oh, it hurts so bad. It just caught my attention. I was like, well, what was that? And it was just this overwhelming feeling of Savior, of Christ. Like he's real. You can be forgiven. Like you can get out of this. And I remember stopping and I kind of laughed because I kind of looked up like, no way I'm feeling this. There's no way this is even happening. And I ignored it. And it happened a second time and a third time. And the third time it was a little bit stronger. And it was enough to make me stand up and say, okay, this is a permanent decision. And once I do this, there's no turning back, right? Yeah. And at that moment, I just knew I had to get on my hands and knees and pray. And the hardest thing I ever had to do in my entire life at that moment, I was alone in my room, was get on my hands and knees. And I'm like, why can't I get on my hands and knees? There's nobody in my room. There's no one here.
And gravity's there to help you even.
Yeah, it's like, this should be pretty easy. Like I'm in a miserable state of mind right now. I'm getting ready to take my life. Like I should be able to fall down. It was so weird. And finally I just was like, I fell on my hands and knees and it was like a child. I had snot coming out of my nose and tears running down my eyes and I was coughing and I couldn't speak and didn't really know what to say other than just, I don't want to do this. I don't know what to do. If you're real, help me get through this. And I didn't even know really what was going to happen. And I made it through that night. And, I prayed that next morning. I thought, okay, prayer got me through that night. I made it that next morning. And this went on for a few weeks. And so we're getting closer to, March 15th at this point. And so I remember, and so this might have been mid-February when this happened. So this might have went on for a month. And I was still kind of coming in and out of drugs. And I knew how to get off drugs. And that was a struggle because I never wanted to quit. And I'm like, oh man, I know I have to get off drugs to think straight. I've got to get off this. I've got to try to beat this addiction or at least get my head clear. And so COVID hit in California, or was coming to hit in California, and it got scary fast. And I was living on a reservation, Round Valley Indian Reservation in Covelo, California. And it was, their military came in. And so, and again, no one knows what COVID is at the time. I think this is going all over everywhere, and I guess California was a little bit stricter, but in more places where Native American and indigenous people were, what happened is they're more susceptible to COVID.
Yeah.
For some reason. I don't know why, but they're more susceptible. So they really got that attention. And I remember leaving town and coming back in town, and there was like an outpost set up. And I'm like Outbreak, like the movie Outbreak.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on? And so then my paranoid schizophrenia started kicking in, like, oh my gosh, I missed the rapture. We're in the 7-year tribulation. I'm going to hell. You know what I mean? Like I'm in hell, like, you know, oh my gosh. And I started freaking out. And I remember going in there, like, let me see your driver's license. They're like, hey, you basically, because I lived up there, I could go up there, but like, you can't come in and out. If you got COVID in California, you got taken to a hotel and you were monitored and you were held by the health department, Mendocino County Health Department. The entire time you had COVID, you couldn't leave. They brought you food. Like it was way tight. And so when that happened for me, that really scared me. And there was just this super, super heavy, just dark vapor. Like like I said, I didn't know it at that time because I'd never read the Book of Mormon, but the mists of darkness and that vapor and that kind of like wandering aimlessly and lost was just, it was so intense. And the only thing that was keeping me through those days is I was praying like 5 times a day. And I got back up to the house and I remember getting on my hands and knees again. I prayed to the Lord. I said, this is what I need, Lord. I says, I need something tangible. Thank you for getting me this month.
Yeah.
Or this 3 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever it was. I need something tangible. And I need it. I didn't pray to ask if a church was true. I didn't pray for a Book of Mormon. I didn't pray for a Bible. And really in my prayer, I'm like, I need money. Like, I need a bag of money. Like, I need to see to be that miracle where I pulled up a rock or I was digging in my backyard and I found like this ancient archaeological site.
Yeah.
And I'm up on the reservation and there's all kinds of cool stuff you find in the ground up there. And so I'm thinking, and there's all kinds of stories about, 1849 during the gold rush that people hid gold.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I need to find a big giant gold nugget in the backyard. And I really would go out there. Like, I wouldn't dig holes in the backyard, but I really was thinking this in my mind. Like, this is the only thing to get me out of this. And so, I just prayed to him and said, I need you to give me something. I need it. I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to do this because this March 15th date was already kind of being talked about. Like this date was coming up. We're shutting down.
Yeah.
And I says, I'm not going to be able to do this. And California was crazy. They check your temperature when you go into stores. I mean, the interesting thing about San Francisco and like Northern California, or I guess maybe in general in California, at least everywhere I went, California, is as wild and kind of leftist and kind of liberal it is down there. They really like follow the rules in COVID. And it was like, if you got within 6 feet of somebody, they would be like, call you out. Like, don't come close. Don't come near me. If you're told to wear masks everywhere, you wore them everywhere. And so, and I said, you were just basically locked down in your house. And if you were going somewhere, they only let so many people in at the store at a time. They check your temperature. So I was really scared. I prayed and I said, I need something. I need a miracle, something tangible. And it was a day went by, maybe 2 days went by, and I was sitting on my bed. And I went to time I can't remember if it was showering or getting out of the shower. It was early in the morning or I was doing something. And I noticed something underneath my bed, a box that otherwise wasn't there before, just wasn't there. Danielle took everything. I mean, it was stripped. There was nothing. There was a bed there and a dresser and my clothes, and that was it. And I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, that's weird. I kind of ignored it, but the box was, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, if you watch the first Jumanji, where that box kind of rumbles and gets your attention, it was that impactful. Like, it wasn't rumbling, but it was like in my soul.
You knew
there
was something.
What's in that box, And so I remember pulling the box out and sitting on my bed after a whole day. And I was scared. And I remember telling the Lord, I got on my hands and knees and I said a prayer and I said, all right, whatever's in this box is for me. So I made a deal. I said, I'm going to open this box. If there's a gun in this box, I'm taking my life. If there's something in this box that's indicating that direction, that's how serious I was about it. And I remember opening it, and there was some junk on top. It wasn't like right away, and I kind of was digging through some stuff, and I thought, what is this? And I saw this kind of purse, this purse-looking thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is that? And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute. No way. And I pull it out, and so I guess it would be 22 years ago during my first when I got baptized and when I prior to getting married, I was given a set of scriptures and kind of being prepped to go on a mission. And and that's what was in that box. And that was and when I left Bountiful, it was like 97, I think, something like that. 98, I can't remember. Might have been 98. When I left in those 3 months, that was part of what I disregarded. I didn't want nothing to do with the church when I kind of denounced that.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen those scriptures in 21 years, and that's what was in that box. And so right at the lockdown, that week of the lockdown, when I said, Lord, I need something to get through this. I need money. I need something of value. At the time I didn't realize how valuable it was, but you can write a check with enough zeros on it. That's how valuable that miracle was to me. It had every single thing you needed in there to understand everything what's going on. Mm-hmm. My patriarchal blessing, which I read my patriarchal blessing 1 or 2 times and I thought I threw it away. That was in there. There was a book by Boyd K. Packer on temples that was in there. There was a pamphlet in there that explained the plan of salvation. There was a booklet in there. I don't think they make them anymore, but it's called the Missionary Pal. They used to give them to missionaries when they go out to help you. There are quick reference guides for understanding gospel principles. There was a book in there. I don't think it's available anymore that you could, that it's basically the the top 10 things that the church believes in, or the top 20 things that the LDS Church believes in. And at that time, in 1996, when that book was given to me, we were studying the Book of Mormon. There was a 1996 copyright Book of Mormon study guide in there. And guess what was being studied in 2020?
Yeah, the Book of Mormon 4 years ago. Yeah.
So, I mean, you want to talk about, and when I opened it, when I come to realize all this stuff was in there, I literally looked up and laughed. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah.
And I'm like, all right. And I cold turkey quit that day. The only value that I had around the house to make money is I had drugs that I was selling. And I actually filmed that I flushed about $30,000 worth of drugs down the toilet. And I had like $150, $200 to my name. It was crazy. Because I could have traded that, like trading with cannabis and different drugs. That's a real thing. It's a real commodity in that business, and you can trade and get more things. And so, well, I can trade whatever it is, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, pills. And because there's so much cannabis where I was at, and there's so much of it, the value in that area was down. And so the value of if you had a drug that had a higher value, you could get like 10 times out of cannabis. And then I could take that cannabis and send it up here to Salt Lake, and I could get, 10 times the value of it down there.
Wow.
And so to do that for me was very hard. I'm like, I really got to do this. And in fact, I'd made that decision. I did a trade for cannabis. And so I'd made this trade after I'd found all this stuff, and I had this just real heavy weight on me. Like, I shouldn't have done that. Like, you should not have done that. And I wasn't even really kind of in my repentance process or even my sobriety process. I just kind of started that, but like, this is the only way I'm going to get money. And I made this trade, and I was like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. And I knew I shouldn't have done that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. You just don't go and get a trade back, right?
Yeah.
And these people don't work that way, people. And so I'm like, okay, well, I made a mistake. I don't know what I'm going to do about it now. And that next day, it's never happened to me my entire life. The guy calls me back and says, hey man, I decided I don't want to trade. I'm going to give this stuff back to you. Can I get back what I got from you? And I would never do that. And he did that with me. And I'm like, so I knew right then. So yeah, so I filmed all this stuff. Yeah, going through and just flushing all this stuff down the toilet. And it was kind of an interesting thing. And so, yeah, I read the Book of Mormon for the first time in 2020, not just read it, studied it. I think that year I think I did 300 or 400 hours. I studied it. I really got into it, really wanted to understand it, really, and I thought, okay, I come across, praying, and coincidentally by some weird channels come across Come Follow Me. That was because there's a lot of stuff on the internet that was really crazy going on at that time. I didn't really know what to pick or what to choose.
Yeah.
Wasn't, obviously I had this stuff given to me. So I'm like, all right, Lord, you're trying to tell me something. You just didn't give me a Bible. I have not seen these scriptures. These scriptures should be in the landfill, decomposing,
years ago,
turning into a fossil fuel by now.
Yeah.
And they're under my bed. So I don't know what's more of a miracle, the fact that they miraculously appeared under my bed, or that I have not seen them and they've been following me around this whole entire time and I never knew it until the time that I needed it, right? I don't know which is more of the miracle.
Yeah.
It's more of a miracle that they would be following me around this entire time than magically appearing under my bed and me not even knowing it except for the time that I needed it, because the Lord is just amazingly omniscient.
Yeah.
And, I don't know all the words, omnibenevolence and omnipresent and just all of these things that you can't even wrap your head around to just know at that moment, right? But we still have agency. And so, yeah, I read the Book of Mormon and it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. There were several times I had to set it down because it was so powerful and so impactful on me and so miraculously relevant to our day. That's what blew my mind, how I can read something and be like, this is crazy, because I feel like I'm reading our life right now, what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And to understand, like I said, to never really understand the Book of Mormon and it just to make perfect sense when I read it and to understand and just like, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. And to get through it and come across, hard sayings, things that, you shouldn't do, but you're doing them. But then when you read something that's so powerful, you're like, oh, whoa. Like when I came across in Alma, when he talks to, is it Coriantumr that kind of sleeps with the harlot? Is that right? Or is
his son? Yeah.
It's one of his sons, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, when it comes across and he talks about sexual sin, and he talks about sexual sin, he's saying, well, the Lord doesn't look at sin with the least allowance. However, if we're going to categorize sin, murder is number one and sexual sin is number two. And that was really something that I was like, whoa, I just set it down and be like, okay, we're all in trouble. Like, because the Book of Mormon was so powerful at that point of me. It was truth.
Yeah.
Everything that I'm reading out of is truth. It doesn't matter. I don't care anything about prior to it. I don't care what people in the church leave about it. Like, it was so powerful to me. And to have to take those moments and set them down and pray and understand those. And it helped me. The interesting thing about it is it helped me cross every bridge that I needed to cross, the bridges that I knew that I needed to cross, and the bridges that I didn't even know that I needed to cross. Yeah. Right. And it showed me how to do that, even though I wasn't even seeking direction how to do that. I was just like, okay, I'm supposed to read this. I'm supposed to read the Book of Mormon because there's a Book of Mormon study guide in there. There's not a Bible study guide. There's a Book of Mormon study guide in there. That's the last time I looked at this book was during that. They were studying the Book of Mormon during that year.
Yeah.
And in 2020, I find on the internet, they're studying the Book of Mormon now.
Yeah.
And so it taught me everything. And one of the most impactful one is beating my addiction. That was hard. And the cold turkey thing, 90 days is kind of a given in addicts world. I shouldn't say it's a given for everybody, but it's kind of like, okay, 30 days, most people can do, right? As long as you kind of stay away from certain areas of certain things. If you get in a program or you really try hard, you can do 90 days. But after 90 days, it's really tough, especially if you don't want to quit, and especially knowing that you have to quit and you're kind of in this, I made this commitment that I'm going to quit. And you sleep a lot and you eat a lot. And there's a lot of things that kind of help you get through that. Then all of a sudden you kind of get past this 90 days where you're like, wow, what do I do now? And I remember, praying about that. Okay, I this is going to be tough. I'm stuck, and I'm stuck in an area where there's a lot of drugs, and I've got to really try to get past this. There's a lot of idle time. It's COVID. I mean, everything was shut down. It was crazy.
Yeah,
so,
that was your pastime.
Yeah. So, and I remember just clearly the Spirit just, all of a sudden just fasting. This fasting just all of a sudden I thought, well, that's weird. They're fasting a lot, And as I'm reading the Book of Mormon, I'm searching things that I come across in the Book of Mormon, not Book of Mormon specific, but searching things just out of promptings, right? Like fasting, prophets and apostles, different things like that, things in the Bible that relate to the Book of Mormon, right? Not looking at, is this true? I was aware that it was true when that was given to me at that time. That miracle happened. But now having a testimony that's true, right? And really believing that and being able to stand up and stand behind that. And so one of the things that was really intriguing to me and that just kept impressing me is fasting. And so I really started looking up fasting in the Bible and reading things about fasting. And all these prophets and all these people are fasting. Christ fasted for 40 days before he started his ministry. There is something impactful. I don't know what of one of the Gospels that it's in, where the apostles try to cast out a spirit and they can't do it. And when Christ comes down and casts this spirit out, the apostles goes, well, how come we couldn't cast this spirit out? And he says, well, this spirit is a different spirit. I'm summarizing and paraphrasing, but he says, this spirit's a different spirit. This spirit requires much fasting and praying. And the chapters prior to that was when Christ is on the Mount of Transfiguration. Huh. And so it doesn't say there, but I can imagine he was probably fasting prior to that event happening, right? And he was probably in deep prayer. And so these things really, and I think in the Bible, it's like 70 times, 75 plus times fasting is spoken about in the Bible.
Interesting. And
in the Book of Mormons, 30, 40 times fasting is mentioned. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I need to fast. I didn't know why I needed to fast. And that's difficult to do when you first start fasting. I was like 6 hours into it. I'm like, I'm dying. I'm like rolling on the ground, like stomach pains. And I'm like,
I am the worst. I am not good at fasting. So
Yeah.
I can visualize this.
yeah. And it took me a few months to get through my first 24-hour fast. And so the point of my story to my addiction and fasting is I went 1 year and I fasted once a week for a year straight. And if I was to attribute two things to breaking my addiction, number one is Jesus Christ, right? He's 51%. He'll always be 51%. We will never, ever be more. But, we are required to meet him at somewhere. He's always going to meet us more than halfway, right? Yeah. And what you got to do and what I got to do and, what anybody else has to do is always going to be different, but it's got to be your 100%. So if it's 30% that's your requirement, it better be 100% of your 30%, right?
Yeah.
I'm very strong-willed, and I knew I'm this 49%, and it was fasting and prayer. And fasting, we underutilize fasting. The power of fasting will blow your mind. When you're seeking answers, when you're seeking direction, when you're seeking to break something. And it's interesting that it's a requirement because even with what's required for us to live, food and water, we're still required to deny ourselves of every once in a while. And that's kind of the whole point. We're down here to deny ourselves of everything, including what requires us to live. And if you can deny yourself of something that you're required to live for a period of time, it makes you be something nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible. So I really preach that to a lot of people and really press that to a lot of people. And I have a lot of people that come back and be like, whoa, like it's a big thing. And it's not just food. Food is no pun intended, is the meat and potatoes of fasting.
Yeah.
But put your phone away
for
24 hours. Shut your phone off. Shut your TV off. Go away and, alone for a moment. And there's so many points that it talks about in the scriptures that really specifies that. We're supposed to be together and worship in a group, but there's a time where we just need to go away and to be by yourself, to pray and to fast with purpose, right? Just don't fast and not eat because you're just starving yourself. But yeah, that was very impactful on me. In 2020, I was basically in solitary confinement for, 2 years. And that whole entire time, I was blessed and privileged to just be able to study and read and really, really read, really study, really pray, and really just, it's interesting, make up for 29 years that I lost that you'd never, ever be able to do. I could never do that now because I'm working.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 8, 9, 10 hours a day I would read, and I could ponder on stuff and find a great YouTube channel that was really breaking down scriptures and really helping me understand, different points of view. So.
Wow. So when did you start going back to church?
So California was locked down,
Yeah.
and that's one of the first things they locked down. The liquor stores were open, but the churches were closed. So, yeah, weird thing. And I think that was under like the guise of mental health. We got to leave the liquor stores open because of mental health. We got to close the churches. So it was, I want to say it was like 2021, like they finally opened it up in California, like the beginning of 2021, something like that. And I found a church. It was an hour and a half drive from the reservation that I was on to go there. And it wasn't easy to get down there. Inflation went through the roof. In Mendocino County, at one point, we hit $8 a gallon for gas.
Oh, mama.
Yeah, crazy. Really wild to just kind of sit back and be by yourself and kind of be in an environment to really watch all this go down and not be distracted by anything else. And it was such a blessing and a privilege for me to be that, to kind of really be like, whoa, is everybody seeing what's going on? What I'm seeing what's going on? And I come to find out that some people did and some people didn't, just different variations, because I don't think a lot of there's other states, like I don't think Utah got locked down as severe as California. Mm-mm. I don't think Florida was like that way, but like Washington, Oregon, New York, California, Chicago, these bigger cities, I think these more democratic, left-wing, liberal type cities were really super strict on it, and everybody really, really followed it. And so to kind of sit back and watch that, and so being able to go back to church finally was really cool. And I found a ward there and just showed up, just walked in, and it was different because it was just, my understanding was, which is weird to me. I figured, oh my gosh, the church is going to be packed. And I was really disheartened a little bit to find out that like a lot of people left church when COVID hit and stopped going to church because they started in-home church, right? And it had the opposite effect on me. And so it was an older ward. There was no deacons there at all. There was, I think, one person in primary. I think the average age there was like 65, 70. Yeah. But here's the cool thing about it. Because I showed up, and probably because I'm young and I was hungry for the word and for the Lord, and to just this repentance process I was going through was absolutely mind blowing and amazing to me. These miracles and I had some spiritual experiences that I can't even talk about because people would think I'm crazy, and they're special too. I mean, just mind blowing spiritual experiences and miracles. I think back, like I would never have survived. And the Lord blessed me with everything that I needed every time I needed it. Every single time I needed it. I mean, all the way up into my job that I have now.
Yeah, that's actually like you have mentioned that you didn't have money. How did you
things
for 9 months, you said?
Things slowly trickled in. I salvaged things. I lost my main property in the biggest California the largest single wildfire in California history. It was a 1,000,000-acre wildfire.
I usually talk about something that is spiritually uplifting for myself or for my family in some way or another at this point. But today I am seeking advice. I would love to know what you think. What has worked for you? So one of my children claims not to have a testimony, claims to not know how to get a testimony, claims to not understand the scriptures. I can understand parts of those things, but as a whole, I don't believe my child. That might be wrong. You might be listening and think, well, yeah, you're wrong, Andrea. But we have been really consistent in our family to read scriptures together, to pray together, to go to church together, to seek uplifting activities together. As parents, we have encouraged our children to do their own scripture reading, to participate in church activities for themselves, not because we make them. We have pointed out times when our home has been filled with the Spirit, when we have had good discussions about gospel topics, or even just having a good feeling. But this child fights against that, is so stubborn against that. What is your advice? What has worked for you? What could we do better? What do you think? I just know that I have a testimony that when I do those things, I feel good. And I have a testimony that Heavenly Father answers my prayers. Like, often. So I'm not sure how to help this child. What do you think? I just would love to hear from you. And I really hope you have a super wonderful, awesome day. Tribe of Testimonies is not sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The music is a traditional hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, arranged and performed by Kyle Forsyth. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear how this podcast is affecting you. And I'm always looking for guests. If you or someone you know would be a great guest, you can reach me at tribeoftestimonies@gmail.com.